Welcome. My name is Ken Kimball. I'm an advancement officer here at Christian Brothers High School. We'd like to begin our program today like we do every day, every class of every day, in prayer. So I'd like to call on Monsignor John MacArthur, class of 66, to open us up.
Let us remember we are in the holy presence of God in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Lord, first of all, we give thanks to you for almost 150 years, the Christian Brothers in high school, and college, university, being here in Memphis, Tennessee. We give thanks for all those who've come before us, those living and deceased brothers, faculty, staff, students, parents, and benefactors, but those serving today, our Christian brothers, those on this great faculty and staff, our student body, many who are here, our parents and benefactors who invest so much, we thank you. Also, I want all of us to give thanks to Brother Chris Englert, who for 30 years has served as principal and president, will be moving on to new ventures in his vocation and leadership. We thank you for all that he has done, the remarkable progress and love and devotion that he's given to this community over these years, and bless him always. We especially welcome our guests, Carol Bartz and Lauren McHugh Robinson, who's a current mom. We thank you for these accomplished women, loving mothers and wives, successful people, successful women in their chosen careers and fields. They are great people who have made a great difference. They've shared their time, talent, and treasure to do great things with their lives. As another little woman said, Mother Teresa, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. Lord, we ask your help through the example of Mother Teresa, the life and the words of Carol and Lauren to inspire us to be our very best. St. John Baptist de La Salle, live Jesus in our hearts. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Thank you, Monsignor. How many of y'all, this is your first time at the FedEx Speaker Series? By a show of hands, please. Awesome. Good number. This is actually the third installment of the Speaker Series. This program was put together in partnership with the Marr Department of Business and Economics here at Christian Brothers. We're very fortunate to have very progressive elective academic tracks for our students here. Many of them are with us today. Surprisingly, this has got to be the biggest student turnout that we've had, and I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that we invited the girls from St. Agnes and St. Mary's to be here, but to all the young women that are here today, you are very welcome to be here. I know it's not a dance or, after football game party, but we're absolutely glad that you're here on this occasion. As I mentioned, the FedEx Speaker Series, this is our third installment. The first one, Fred and Richard Smith held the stage this past spring. It was Dr. Downing, the CEO of St. Jude, along with Dr. Fred Azar, who's the chief of orthopedics at Campbell Clinic. We had an opportunity to reach out to Carol. We thought it would be very appropriate for Lauren, as a local business leader, to help facilitate the conversation. So we're very excited to have them here with us. There are lots of opportunities for partnerships at Christian Brothers High School, and the FedEx Speaker Series is just one great example of that. If you have any questions about our academic programs or any of our offerings here at Christian Brothers, there's a number of guys on the faculty, and John, if you'll raise your hand in the back there, our admissions staff will be happy to talk to you. So, at this time, I would like to call up Brother Chris, our long-tenured leader at the school. So much of our academic success in recent years and certainly the facilities have been because of his leadership. So, I'll call on Brother Chris to make the formal introductions.
Thank you, Ken. I'd like to welcome Carol, been traveling a lot, and also Bill. I know this is a busy time for you guys, and appreciate you taking the time to stop by your alma mater. Now, our moderator this morning could most certainly hold the stage on her own. How many of you have ever been to a Huey's restaurant? All right, now here's the next question. How many of you have been able to get the toothpick into the ceiling? Not many. Well, there's a group over there. I got to find the secret to that. So, actually, Alex showed me how to do that. So, Huey's restaurants are as successful as Memphis business story that there is, and CBHS parent Lauren McHugh Robinson has been at the helm of the company during much of their growth. Lauren and her sister started working in the restaurant for her father, the late Thomas Boggs, at an early age. After graduating from the University of Memphis, Lauren went to work for NBC Bank. While at the bank, she earned her MBA in management. In 1993, Lauren joined her father at Huey's and eventually led their expansion by opening their first location out of Midtown and into Cordova. By 2003, Huey's had added 5 new locations. She continued to work side by side with her father as he was steadily teaching her the ropes in preparation for becoming the future president of Huey's. And now there are 7 Huey's in the area. In 2007, she was promoted to president of the company, and in 2008 became the CEO. Lauren serves on the boards of the Memphis Athletic Ministries, Shelby Farms Park Conservancy. Lauren was named the 2015 Tennessee Restaurateur of the Year, an award presented by the Tennessee Hospitality and Tourism Association. She was recently named the 2017 Restaurateur of the Year by the Memphis Restaurant Association. Please grant a warm welcome to CBHS parent and supporter, Lauren McHugh Robinson. Thank you.
Carol, it's great to be with you here today. We've got several questions we want to ask you about technology and leadership and education. And before we get started with that, could you tell us just a little bit about your background? I understand that you grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin.
I did. But before I start with that, a lot of people ask me, what does it mean to be a CEO? It means a lot of things, but one of the things it means is you don't have to go to a meeting at 7 in the morning. Because you get to set the time. So, I don't know, Brother Chris, if it was you or what, but this is awfully early. So back to, I grew up in Wisconsin, town of 1,000 people, dairy farm. My mom died when I was 8. When I was 12, my brother was 6, we went to live with my grandma. And just had a classic Midwestern Wisconsin raising. Went on to school in Missouri, then back to University of Wisconsin. I programmed my first computer in 1968. Not many of you were even born here in 1968. And I fell in love with it. I thought I was going to be a math person, but I programmed that computer and said, wow, this is the most fun thing anybody could do. So I feel very fortunate that I was in computers my whole life and made it from Atlanta to Boston to Silicon Valley and have seen everything. I personally knew Steve Jobs, I know Bill Gates, I've been to their homes. So not that I'm trying to brag, I'm just saying there were just a small collection of people in the Valley back in the early 90s, late 80s. And so technology to me is just fun. Yeah. It's just second nature. And but we'll get into more of that.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us about your transition from the University of Wisconsin to when you first entered the world of technology.
Well, that was actually pretty simple. I had huge college loans, and so I just needed a job. And I had, through high school and college, worked in the back office of banks. So I went to work for a bank in Minneapolis, St. Paul, as a correspondent banker, helping them transition to automation. So I had North and South Dakota, Wyoming, Minnesota, Wisconsin was my territory, and I wore white go-go boots and had hair to my waist. So I was quite the image. Nobody talked about dress for success back then. And I would convince Mary, the back office lady, to give me all of her debits and credits and send them into Minneapolis to be processed, and then we'd send her back a listing. That didn't work really well, especially with this young woman standing there, but that was my job, and finally made it through that and got to 3M, where I became a proper systems analyst, and then on to digital equipment and various places.
Okay. So you've held several senior executive positions with major technology players, but AutoDesk seems to be the hallmark of your professional resume. And over the 14 years you were there, you served as CEO, president, and chairman. And you took the company from $300 million in revenue to $1.5 billion. What is AutoDesk?
Well, first of all, the two hallmarks, well, I didn't love every job I had, that's crazy. Because I didn't love every boss I had. But I'm sure my people love me tremendously. So I did Autodesk for 14, 15 years, and then on as chairman, and then I did Yahoo for 3 years. And both of those, comparing and contrasting them, Autodesk is a company that makes software for design. So if you think of a roll of drawings, which are no longer rolls of drawings, but if you think of architectural work, mechanical design, civil design, and it's very appropriate here, as I used to say for our tagline, if God didn't make it, one of my customers did. Mm-hmm. And, which was true. I mean, we don't make trees, but we certainly use the process of the tree to make buildings and design them and so forth. So that was clearly very interesting. It took me all over the world. I've been in about 60 countries selling these products and selling the concept and having fun. And then I retired from there and then got called out of retirement by sheer boredom and went to Yahoo, and totally different category because now it's a consumer and it's selling to ad agencies. So you have two businesses. You have the business of making a billion consumers happy, and then you have the process of trying to get advertisers to advertise so you can make some money to keep those billion users happy. So I love the fact that I've had that variety.
All right. You and Bill live in Northern California, where you remain plugged into the business community in Silicon Valley. When it comes to the world of technology, what do you see happening now and into the future?
People ask me this question a lot, and I think one of the important things for us all to remember when we're thinking that artificial intelligence is going to take over, or robots are going to take over, self-driving cars are going to take over, and oh my God, things are going. I shouldn't have said that right. Oh, I don't know how to say it any other way. Oh my gosh, that's it. Okay. When people get nervous about that, I just think back, it's just change. It's just like change from the horse and buggy to the original cars. It's change from how people make clothing. It's just change. And some change is good and some change has a fallout. And it works its way through the system. And so at any one given time, something can make you nervous, but you have to have enough change muscle in your body to say, let's see what's going to happen here, and how can this be beneficial? I mean, look at all the robotics when we're afraid of robots in the healthcare system. And it's wonderful because they can be so much more precise than the human hand. And so when we sit there and say, oh, the robot's going to take over the world and nobody's going to have a job, the job you should have is making robots. So just stay interested in what's happening on the current front, and don't spend time thinking about all the bad things that are going to happen with it. Think about the possibilities. The possibility of the driverless car. Once it gets sorted out and have the right lanes on the roads and so forth, it's going to stop deaths just like that. Because those cars will know how to drive themselves correctly if they have the right highways and obviously the right technology, which is not today. But it's coming, so you can fight it and say, I'm gonna keep driving my horse, or you can say, how can I be involved in it? And for all you young people here, that's where the excitement is, and that's what's going to be fun to be in the middle of. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You can do it as a technologist, you can do it as a marketeer, you can do it as a salesperson. There's just a lot of ways to get involved in technology. You can do it as a user, but make sure that you're staying current with what's happening.
What do you think are the most important characteristics of a great manager or leader, particularly in the rapidly changing technology industry?
Well, first of all, they should all be female. I expect a little more applause than that. That is really weak. Oh, there's Christian Brothers boys in here. Oh, well, some guys can have the big jobs. You know, I think the biggest thing is to be able to listen. I didn't run these companies by myself. These numbers aren't my success. These numbers are the success of everybody working at the company. And it was only my job to sort out problems that teams or people couldn't sort out, and that is listening. Mm-hmm. Now, did I have to have some idea what was going on? Yes. I'm very happy to have had my computer science degree and programmed, and so they couldn't actually pull the wool over my eyes, but the whole concept was just being there and being a good listener and sorting things out. And there's a reason that, 2 ears and 1 mouth and all that business. But although my mouth can outrun my 2 ears pretty quickly. But that is the most important thing, is to remember that people are people. They have their own issues and concerns and family problems at times and this and that. And you have to know that because you run that kind of business. Yeah. Any business is about people, and the people have to have a leader that cares about them. Yeah.
So there are many women in the audience today. What advice would you give women related to their career development?
Well, try something different. Push yourself. Take classes that you wouldn't think you wanted to take and just see what happens. What I used to tell my girls and my son is try it. All I ask you to do is try it. If you try for an A, if you try your best and you don't get it, fine, because you tried it. But if you're studying or trying to be a B or C person, that's not very interesting. And that's not going to really get you through life. Mm-hmm. So what I would say to any young person is get out of your comfort zone. Take a class that you wouldn't normally take. Take a job and try something. And don't worry so much about, is it a bigger position? Am I going to be promoted? And this is more talking about what's going to happen in your life in a couple of years. It's more about, what am I learning? I believe no matter how old you are, and some of us are pretty old, you have to keep learning, because if you're not, what's interesting? There's nothing interesting. And so an interested person, listen now carefully what I'm saying. An interested person is an interesting person. So if you are interested in the world going around you, and you can talk about what's happening in the world and what's happening in your classes, you're interesting to other people. Mm-hmm. If you're not paying attention to what's going on, who wants to talk to you? Yeah. I mean, did you even know that there's a hurricane going on? Well, if you don't, it's like, well, where have you been? Mm-hmm. So keep thinking about always being an interesting person.
So are the challenges facing women today in business the same or different from when you started your career?
Both. But rather than focus on the one side of it, if you had a computer science degree back then, it didn't matter if you looked like a monkey. because it was such a new concept. In fact, my first job at Digital Equipment out of Boston, you could only be in sales if you were a double E, an electrical engineer, or a computer science graduate. That's it. You had to have one of those degrees. Well, fortunately, there were two of us in the country that worked for DEC as salespeople because both of us she had an double E and I had a computer science degree. And so it just unlocked doors back then. We were such an unusual breed that it wasn't discriminatory to get a job. Yeah, there were this issue and that issue, but it wasn't discriminatory. In fact, the real interesting issue was many times I would do a course for management on what technology was. So here I was, an entry-level person teaching senior management about computers because, think about it, they didn't know what they were. They didn't come up through that process. And because I had a degree, that gave me an advantage. Yeah. And so it's always nice to think about, as you're thinking about your life, how do you get a personal advantage because of what you've studied or what your internships have been, and frankly, how interesting you are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You had been working in technology a long time before social media existed. What would you say to young people today about social media, particularly as it relates to their future careers?
Well, I'm going to say the obvious. Keep the stupid pictures out of there. Mm-hmm. But surely they've beat that into you by now. Right? Right? Because the other thing I will tell you is, don't believe the delete button. It doesn't go away. So don't ever put it up there. My poor daughter, youngest daughter, managed to have, we were gone for a weekend, managed to have an unauthorized party that got broken up by the police at like 3 in the morning, and we got the call. And so we got home, we were in Southern California, so I went out there with my notepad, I'm going to take notes and interrogate her. And so got her to spill the beans and said, I'm going to look into your devices and find out how this all happened and how it all started. And so she came back the next day and says, my friends say that you can't find that information. I said, your friends don't run a software company. So that kind of put a chill on that. We didn't have any more problems with that. And a month later, she got her technology, she got her laptop and stuff back. So let me tell you, if somebody wants to find something, it's there. Mm-hmm. So don't put it there in the first place. Yeah. But having said that, there's good reasons for social media. There's good reasons for informing people as quickly as possible, for forming and lasting friendships and so forth. So I'm not negative on social media. Frankly, I'm glad I'm no longer managing in the world of social media, because you'd stand up in front of your company, a couple thousand people sitting out there, and try to talk to them about what's happening. And I'd look out and I'd see everybody recording it. And instantly it was going online. Well, what am I going to say? Am I going to say these are all, our plans for the future? Mm-hmm. How can I do that? So then I'm standing up there babbling, and they're not satisfied because they're not getting the information they want to hear. I'm not satisfied because I know before I get off stage, it's already posted. So managing in this world, especially in high-profile companies, is very, very difficult. And you guys are in an interesting position because you're here when it started, and so watching it evolve into how you want to manage your lives and your children's lives is going to be one of the hardest things you do.
Mm-hmm. What can young people today do to best prepare themselves for a career in technology?
Well, everybody's going to say STEM, math, science, engineering. Math is just about logic. Actually, some of the best programmers are musicians because it really is about spatial information. So, but I started out with math, so I'm pretty favorable towards it, but it isn't math itself. It's logical, which is this number is bigger than this number, and if this happens, that should happen. I mean, programming is sort of just a logical consequence of if-then. If this situation occurs, then we should do this in the program. In a driverless car, if somebody runs in front of me, I should stop. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. And so I'm huge in getting as much logical training as you can get. Whether it's math, whether it's engineering, that stuff is not that scary. It really isn't. To me, what's scary is writing an essay. Oh my gosh, I can hardly write my last name behind my first name. But I love the rest of the world. I love that. So if you at all can try a couple courses and get your friends to try them with you, I think that's one of the most important things you can do. It's not just the boys, it's everybody. One of the things that worries me a little bit is one of the easiest way that people are getting into technology these days is through gaming. Mm-hmm. And the games are really slanted towards this side of the room. Why aren't you guys a little more mixed up? I thought that was the whole point. The girls are here. The boys are there. You're just trained that way?
They're behaving.
They're behaving?
Yes.
Oh, they're behaving. So I worry about gaming because the games are more naturally tilted towards the males, and so they more naturally feel not afraid of technology. So that people are working to try to change that, but to the extent that you guys can get some, take some programming classes. Programming is really fun. It really is fun. And just try it. And by the way, if at the end of taking 2 courses, let's not stop with 1, you might just have a bad teacher or something. At the end of 2, you really don't like it, that's fine, but you tried.
Yeah. So you've got some young grandchildren. How early should technology be introduced? Where do you see that folding in education?
I'm not really an expert on this. I know people worry about the amount of screen time and this and that. It depends on what's on the screen. Mm-hmm. If they're learning shapes and numbers and so forth on the screen, that's one thing. If they're watching Frozen all day, that's another thing. See, I'm cool. I know what Frozen is. I've never seen it, but I'm sure my daughter here will take me right home and show me Frozen. Mm-hmm. So next time I can be cool. But it's more about what's happening on those screens. Yeah. But one of the things that I think we've all marveled in is how a young child, very, very young, can take that device and just go with it. Because they're not intimidated, they don't think it's going to break, where you take one of you guys, old guys, you're like, well, should I press this button? Yeah. It's like, press the button. Mm-hmm. See what happens. It's not going to blow up in your face. But that's naturally what happens because we didn't use it young. But young people take to technology very nicely. And
not afraid.
Not afraid.
Yeah. What do schools need to do to better prepare the future workforce of America in general, in your opinion?
Well, this is a funny audience for this comment, but not everybody should go to college. I'm just going to say that just in general for the business leaders here. We make too much emphasis on everybody going to college and university. We have to have people going into the trades. We have to have people that can make things. And those are great jobs to be had. Mm-hmm. If you are smart enough and have financial resources and whatever to go to college, do it. But if you're going because somebody just tells you to go, that's a really bad idea. There's all kinds of, look at the computers. Somebody has to fix them. Yeah. And you can make a lot more money fixing computers than a lot of those people out there trying to do something with computers. Yeah. And we just don't do enough training in America on that concept.
Yeah. Great. So, Carol, if you were 18 again, knowing what you know now and having experienced what you have experienced, what advice would you give yourself?
I wouldn't listen. I wouldn't listen. Mm-hmm. But being a little more serious, always really try. I had too many friends. I still have college friends, and they said, "Why didn't you tell us to go into computers? Because then we could have what you have, whatever it is I have." And I go, "You thought I was stupid for going into computers because it was hard. You wanted to take the easy way out. You wanted to do Latin American studies, to supposedly work in the UN, never." And so the point is, don't take the easy way out. Let me tell you something. Everybody in this room, you're going to work for 50 years because you got to pay for me because I'm not working anymore and I still need money coming from the government. That's going to be you. So you got 50 years to work. 50. Think about it. Probably even a little more. But no, let's say you're 20, you got to work till 70, maybe 55. I'll up that number. 55 years to work. First of all, you're going to have at least 3 distinguished separate careers. It's not one of these things where you're going to be in a bank for 50 years. You're going to be in various combinations of jobs. So when you think about that, you better get set up to do something you really like and that you're really trained for, or you're going to slog it through 50 years. Mm-hmm. And I know that seems really weird to you, but if I could tell you anything at your age, get out ahead of yourself a little bit. Listen to your parents and say, why don't you try a little harder? But that has to be you figuring out that you can do it. And one thing I want to say to the women in the room is work to be independent. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get married and all this, but always have enough resources, enough going on for you that you can be independent. Because independence is everything. Independence is the opposite of dependence. If you're dependent on somebody, you have no choices. If you're independent, yet with somebody, that's great. But go for independence.
That's great advice. My dad was very much of that mindset with my sisters and I as we were growing up, and always encouraged us to make sure that we could take care of ourselves.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah. So I think that's all we have for today.
If there are any questions from the audience, we don't have a mic to pass around, but if you raise your hand, I can point to you and speak up.
Oh, after
there's
all
one,
that,
one,
there's
one
not
over
even
here.
one
Yes,
question?
sir. Stand up, please.
Oh.
we'll arrange for a photo
St.
at the end.
Agnes and what's the other?
Yeah, we'll get
St.
everybody
Mary's.
together at the
Of course,
end.
we'll have a picture.
Great question. In the back.
Well, you can look at government right now and figure out the soft skills you should need, which is learning how to get along with each other and learning when to step back and how to integrate with people. The people I've worked with in my career, the ones that were successful, actually could honestly listen to both sides of an argument and then come to conclusion and then stay on track. There's nothing worse than agreeing to something, walking away, knowing you were never going to do it. Whenever I could find those employees, I don't know if you know what that means, but you've got to keep your word. You've got to try and be a good negotiator. And as I said earlier, really be a good listener. Really be a good listener. That if you want to go into the management track, or you want to be a great individual contributor, you're still going to need those skills. Good question.
In the back.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I loved the most was reaching down into the company and talking to some of the younger people, because they actually know what's going on more than I do, because they're right in the middle of it. They actually know. There's nothing worse than they know who the bad bosses are before I do. And so I always would do what I call triangulation, which is 2 people can collude, 3 people can't. Somebody's going to tell. So if you at least, so from the perspective of the young person, respectfully go in and say, I have this problem that I'd like you to hear about, and give me some advice. Be very respectful. And if you have any kind of a good boss, they will totally crumble to that. Because everybody likes to be asked something. Everybody likes to be needed. So if you go in not pushing, but you go in saying, help me understand this, help me is a great thing. Because people want to help. So help me, and then hopefully you have a senior person who is respectful enough of you as a young person or a younger person to want to listen and see what happens. Now, if it doesn't work with one person and you really have some burning information as far as you're concerned, or really want to ask, how do I get ahead? Find some other managers. Find some colleagues that can give you advice. But it's really, really important to get out of your own little, capsule.
We've got time for a couple more. I want to try to grab some students real quick over here.
So show colleges that you already are into technology and so forth. Well, the most important thing you can show colleges is a transcript that has some technology in it. I would also use, if you've gone way beyond that, I would use the essay as a form of explaining why what you've been doing and why technology is important to you, and so on and so on. I mean, there's sort of 2 ways on these applications to get at that answer. One is, again, the courses you've taken and how successful you've been, and the second is through an essay. Every essay doesn't have to be about raising pygmies in the basement. I mean, it can really be about doing something that, something you've actually done as opposed to something you think about.
You had one. The question was, would social media end up getting regulated by the government?
Well, there certainly will be some regulations. It's not going to be that easy to regulate it. I mean, they're going to have to regulate some of the data issues and so forth. But I will tell you, when I ran Yahoo, the Chinese were in our site every day. We'd follow them around, because we wanted to know what they were looking for. So, trust me, I mean, the Russians and the Chinese are there all the time. And it really was more interesting to us. At first, they only wanted to follow Chinese Yahoo users to see if they were being dissidents or whatever. And they weren't paying any attention to the Americans. So we watched this thread go through. So there's more collaboration between tech companies and the government than most people realize. There has to be. So regulation has to be more about when they do inform people and what happens when people are informed, again, around their privacy and so forth. So, but I'm going to say one thing, and this is a former boss of mine, Scott McNeely at Sun Microsystems. Privacy, get over it. You have none. Just get over it. So, it's that simple. If you want privacy, don't do anything, don't walk outside your house. So.
You had a question right here.
So the question is, as a female dominated by males, that I have to struggle for respect. Oh, I can tell you stories. I was at Steve Jobs' house. Bill Clinton was there.
Casual Friday.
Casual Friday. There were about 7 CEOs. We were having a private dinner. And all of them were tech CEOs, except those of you who might remember that Steve Jobs also owned Pixar. So Pixar wasn't really in the mainstream hardware, software, whatever. So the Pixar CEO was there. He didn't know me. The other ones knew me well. So he turned to me and asked me if I'd get him a drink. Well, it didn't happen as you thought. It could have, but it was interesting because the other CEOs immediately said, "Oh, you don't know who this is," before I could, "You don't know who this is. This is Carol Bartz. She's CEO of, AutoDesk, blah, 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 blah." So that happened all the time. Get me the tea, do this. I've been in White House meetings with, Bill, who's the guy that ran Pakistan for a while that we talked about all the time? Yeah. And so it was tech people in the White House supposedly giving them advice and so forth. So we're around this table, and that was a Bush thing, I think. But he skipped right over me. I was the only female at the table, so he's asking every person, "What do you think? What 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 do you think?" And so at that time, the president said, "Well, we also want to hear from Carol Bartz." So that stuff went on all the time. And you just had to assert yourself. And you just had to, okay, I got to give you my favorite one. It turns out there's more Fortune 500 CEOs graduated from Wisconsin than Harvard. And so we were at the University of Wisconsin, held a dinner in the Bay Area for all the Fortune 500 CEOs that from Wisconsin happen to live there. So we were all gathered. So there's people from Safeway, and it's not just tech, it's just, they just ran a company. And so this couple came up to us and immediately asked Bill what company you ran or something. And Mr. Bill here is very Southern. So I said, "I didn't go to the University of Wisconsin." Still didn't get that guy's, he couldn't have been a Wisconsin graduate. So he's still continuing to ask Bill all these questions, totally ignoring me. Wouldn't even say a word to me. And Bill said, "I didn't go to the University of Wisconsin. Get a tip here." So we sat down, this long table, and they started introducing us. And so they got to me and said, "And this is Carol Bartz," and she runs, and this guy goes, "Oh, you're Carol Bartz?" It's like, you couldn't give me 5 minutes of your attention, and now you're like slathering over me. Go away. It was a little worse than that, but I could tell you what it started with and what it ended with, but I can't do that, Brother Chris, no.
Well, this has been a great morning for all of us here. I was thinking as Carol was speaking, and it's obviously in our mission here at Christian Brothers, as well as the other schools represented, that we're making a strong effort to prepare our students for college. But interestingly enough, and I think for all of us in the room to take note, Fred Smith sat in that same chair this time last year and said the same thing that Carol did, that there's other pathways to your career. And I don't think on behalf of the high school that's us advocating for you bypassing college, but just to recognize that it's a big global marketplace out there, and there's many ways that you can pursue, particularly when you're looking at the cost of colleges and what that takes. So it can be done. As the father of 2 young daughters, I very much appreciate you all being here. I think on behalf of all the young women that are here and the women professionals, all the brothers, boys, the alumni, and the parents, we want to thank you both very much. Brother Chris and I have been fortunate to have dinner a couple of times with Bill and Carol, and you can see when she starts telling stories, it's like you just want to shut up and listen because they're so good. So we'll stick around if we want to get some pictures with the kids when we're done. For the students that want to stay for that, I'll dismiss the boys to their teachers and how they want to go through. But we're gonna take pictures up front here, and hopefully these 2 can stick around for some questions. So again, and also too, we started the morning off rough, but we're gonna end it, brother. If you grab those 2 little thank yous there. It's a Catholic school, so we'll.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a nice way to finish the evening. Thank you all very much.